Good morning, this is Marshall Davis. Today I'm going to talk about two sayings in the Gospel of Thomas, sayings 36 and 37. They naturally are grouped together because they both talk about clothing. Let me read them for you. Jesus said, "Do not be concerned from morning until evening and from evening until morning about what you will wear." His disciples said, "When will you become revealed to us? And when shall we see you?" Jesus said, "When you disrobe without being ashamed, and take up your garments and place them under your feet like little children, and tread on them, then will you see the Son of the Living One, and you will not be afraid." The first of these sayings is familiar to us from the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus talking in the Sermon on the Mount. But Matthew's version is more extensive because he just doesn't talk about clothing, but he goes on to talk about food and drink and the length of our lives, being concerned about all these things. So there's a difference. I should note here that that's the way different Gospels are. All Gospel writing involves editing. That's true not just of the Gospel of Thomas, but Matthew and Mark and Luke. They did not record all that Jesus said according to their oral and written sources. They selected which sayings they would put in their Gospels. Thomas here selected just one small part of the Sermon on the Mount about not being concerned about clothing. And then he put it with another saying that we do not have in the canonical Gospels. Thomas focused on clothing and nakedness here. Of course, he's talking symbolically and not literally when he talks about disrobing. Jesus and his disciples did not walk around Galilee naked. If they did, we would have heard about it. The prophet Ezekiel, on the other hand, was known for stripping naked in order to make a point. It was prophetic symbolism, but he was a bit crazy anyway. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says not to be concerned about clothing. Now that seems to be rather a mild point, but the importance of what he has to say cannot be overlooked. Clothing, you see, is a part of a person's identity. It is the way a person expresses who they think they are, both back in Jesus' day and today. Now, I usually wear flannel shirts like I am now. I wear them 3 of the 4 seasons of the year, reverting to island shirts and t-shirts only in the warm weather. I don't do this consciously. I have just liked it, and I've been doing it for so long. It's just, you could say, part of who I am. At least it's part of what this persona is. The shirts are comfortable and they're warm. I like to wear them. My daughter also likes to wear flannel shirts as much as I do. Not so my 2 sons. My daughter's son does not like her to wear flannel shirts. They were going to an event at the junior high not too long ago, maybe a month or so ago. And I forget what it was, a parent-teacher conference or something like that, or something else. And my grandson asked his mom to please not wear a flannel shirt. None of the other moms did, and it embarrassed him. See, he's very aware of clothing, as most teenagers are. Clothing are a statement for teens. I mean, he buys lots of t-shirts, and he buys them according to what the message is on them. So he wears them to make a point. They're part of his identity. Jesus talks about the Pharisees who went around with their long robes wanting to make a point, wanting to be seen. So this is what Jesus is talking about here. Jesus is not talking about keeping warm. He is talking about being concerned about identity, a personal identity. Whereas in the Sermon on the Mount, he probably is talking about simply being warm, having enough clothes to keep warm. But here, in the Gospel of Thomas, it's focusing on personal identity, our ego. When we fixate upon our personal identity, then we become lost in that personal identity, in that ego. And when we identify with the ego and all of its trappings, then we are lost in illusion. But in the next saying, he goes beyond being concerned about clothing and talks about getting rid of the clothing. Let me read it for you again. His disciples said, "When will you become revealed to us, and when shall we see you?" Jesus said, "When you disrobe without being ashamed, and take up your garments and place them under your feet like little children and tread on them, then will you see the Son of the Living One, and you will not be afraid." So this is talking about seeing Jesus as he really is, and seeing ourselves for what we really are. I mean, Jesus physically is standing right there before them so they can see him physically. So that's not what they're talking about. Yet they ask, "When will you become revealed to us, and when shall we see you?" So this is obviously talking about spiritual sight, talking about seeing Jesus' true nature, not seeing his body. Jesus answers by telling his disciples to become like little children. That's a theme that Jesus uses several times in multiple Gospels. Here, he talks about children stripping off their clothing and leaving them on the ground, and stepping on them, stepping over them, and basically running around naked. That's what kids do, little kids. Our kids used to do that, run around the house naked when they were small, and even run around outside and go swimming in the lake naked. Same with our grandkids. Do it inside and outside. But at a certain age, kids become self-conscious of their nakedness. That's what the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden is all about. It's about coming of age. It is a myth that depicts the fabrication of an identity, an egoic identity, and the consequences of that. Jesus is telling his disciples that when they can once again disrobe without being ashamed, then they will be able to see him as he really is. It's the Son of the Living One. They have to become like little children. Again, he's talking about more than physical clothing here. Physical clothing is symbolic of all the psychological clothing that we wear. It represents the masks that we wear. That grandson I was just talking about a moment ago made an elaborate mask to wear trick-or-treating on Halloween. They sent us a photo on our phone. It was an impressive mask. We all wear masks, and some of them are very impressive. But most people don't really realize that they're wearing a mask. When we drop the mask, though, then we see clearly. Clothing masks the body, but ego masks our true selves. So much so that when we think about ourselves and we look at ourselves, we do not see ourselves any longer as we really are. We see the masks, the egoic clothing that we have created, that we have constructed for ourselves, and which society constructs for us, and which we faithfully wear. And we forget that they're fabrications. We think that they really are us. We identify with that constructed self, with the individual, psychological self. We think that's who we really are. And when that self is threatened, then we protect that self, that ego, as if it were really us, as if it were our life. But it's not our life. I think that this is where a lot of the ideas about a personal afterlife come from, and where the fear of death comes from. People identify with that separate individual self, and they feel existentially threatened when that self is in danger. And death, of course, is the ultimate danger to the separate self. And so, to protect ourselves, psychologically, we create myths of an individual afterlife. But deep down we know that the death of the body means the death of this individual separate self, which was created by the brain and therefore dies with the brain, which is part of the body. Now, we can fantasize all we want about heaven, where little individual egos can live forever, worshiping a big individual ego. But all that is just an illusion created by the mind because it cannot conceive of not existing. But the truth, the naked truth, is that all masks eventually die. They cease to exist. And that scares our physical and psychological self to death. Yet, when we see those aren't real, and we allow the self to dissolve, to die, when we take off our psychological clothing and we just let it drop at our feet and we step out of it and we walk over it, then we see what we really are. And we see the world as it really is. And we see Christ as Christ really is. We see that he is the Son of the living one. That expression means that Christ shares the eternal nature of the One, with a capital O, the living one. All of life is one, an expression of this eternal oneness. As the prologue of John's Gospel says, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not been able to overcome it. When we let the masks fall, let the clothing fall away, let the psychological mask and clothing fall, then we see the naked truth that we are one, that we are children of the living one. And that is it for today. Grace and peace to you.